Okay, hello and welcome guys to this shorter video where we cover the homework, so to speak, that we gave. It's optional, of course, but we did throw a couple of these exercises at the end of the first video. And if people want to follow along, they may have actually written their answers. So now it's time to compare our notes and to see if we're both thinking about the position in a similar vein. So the question here was to write down whether you would think that this position calls for active play, more aggressive type of play, or more passive, more conservative play where you're reacting to your opponent instead of creating threats of your own. And we want to sort of make that decision based on two key factors, which is the king safety and how good our pieces are, how well coordinated they are relative to our opponents. In general, we say that if our king safety is worse than our opponents, or if our pieces are worse coordinated, then probably more conservative play is called for. So let's take a look here. We have got, in terms of king safety, we can see that we actually are missing one of our pawns that could provide shelter. And we can also see that these pawns here are on the dark squares, meaning that our light square control is a little bit weak. That's very relevant because he has the light squared bishop. And in combination with the queen, we could certainly imagine that if we're not careful, we're going to get killed on the light squares. On the other hand, if we look at his king, he's got the three pawns in front of him. Yes, this pawn is a little bit advanced, so his cover isn't perfect. But overall, his pawn shelter is far, far better, and consequently his king is far safer than ours. So we had suggested the possibility of a move like queen to g5 as one of the most active possibilities. This is a quick way to lose. The queen ventures forward into the attack, and some threats may occur down the line of being able to win one of these pawns, but it's not relevant because our king safety is so weak that white can continue, for example, with b4, kicking our knight back, and now bishop a6, immediately creating a threat of mate. And actually, funnily enough, the only way that we prevent getting checkmated is to sheepishly return with our queen. And that's the problem. When you try to be aggressive, too active of a plan, but your king safety and your piece coordination don't support that, your attacks are going to get picked off. It's like the chess equivalent of fighting someone twice your size. Usually it's a bad idea. Now, one thing that I want to just remark on before we close this particular position is that actually his queen overall is more active than our queen. His bishop is better than our knight. So not only the king safety is an issue, but his pieces are simply stronger, while the rooks are quite similar, right? They're actually symmetrically placed. So in the game, how I actually tried to handle this is I tried to simplify the position. I played the move queen b7. I reacted to his threatening queen on c6, and I said to him, look, I'm just going to try to diffuse your advantage, and later on maybe I'll get a chance to play for an advantage, but for now I'm just trying not to lose. Was it the best move in the position? Probably not. Maybe the best way to play this position was to take this rook and then go rook d8 and seek simplifications in a different way. But the moral of the story remains the same, right? We want to try and diffuse the advantage that our opponent has. We want to play more conservatively, more passively in this particular example. So let's take a look at the second example. By the way, if you set any move like queen b7 or rook d8 or even knight b7 here with ideas of knight a5 to challenge the queen, these are the kind of moves that I think you guys passed the test. For those, the most important thing is for those who thought active play with a move like queen g5 or g6 to try and generate the attack. If you thought that was a good idea in this position, then it's worth reflecting on these two key points: king safety and who has the better pieces. Let's take a look at the second example. Okay, so in this example, I had the white pieces, and we talked about active possibilities of knight takes e7 here, and the other active possibility to develop our final minor piece with the move bishop to e3. We also talked about a more passive move available, like knight to c3 here. Or perhaps a slightly more timid move like rook to d1, just challenging the bishop on d4. In this case, let's once again review our two key areas, which is king safety and quality of our pieces. So in terms of king safety, whose king appears to be safer here? Well, black has pawns that have marched forward in front of his king, and his king has the potential to get caught along this diagonal. So his king is far from safe. And if we look at our king, on the other hand, it has a much healthier structure in front of it. We haven't played a committal move like pawn to g4. So our king is more safe than his. The second thing is the quality of our pieces. We can see his queen is on the back rank while our queen is on the third rank. We can also see that we have a very strong knight here with a concrete threat of e7, whereas his knight on d6 is a little bit less powerful. We can see his bishops are quite good overall, but they're a bit unstable. This bishop has no defender, and this bishop on e6 at the right moment maybe can even be challenged with some well-timed sacrifice. I would say overall his minor pieces are pretty good, but white's bishop and knight here are at least as good, if not better. The only one that is struggling is this bishop here on c1, but of course with a move like bishop to e3, we would immediately bring that piece into the game, challenging arguably his best piece, which is this bishop on d4. So overall, it's a little bit of a murkier position than, for example, one of the game that we showed, the Tal game. But overall, it seems to indicate that active play is quite attractive versus moves like knight to c3 or rook to d1. In fact, knight to c3 would be quite a significant mistake, and black could play a move like bishop to f5 here. He would be challenging this bishop, and he's happy to exchange pieces, because one thing that should be noted, if you look at the pawn count, white is currently down a pawn. So this is not at all an attractive possibility, and if rook d1, black is able to deal with the threat, improve his queen placement, and challenge this knight all in one. So such passive moves are not so great. The first move, of course, that I considered was to capture this pawn on e7, but after queen c5, I was a little bit turned off from this move because the knight on e7 is difficult to sort of get back into the game. You can play this way, but I considered stronger to be the move bishop to e3, which indeed is the best move in the position, and that's how I played here after bishop e3. Black actually was able to grab a second pawn, but the key point here was now I could take, and there was no move queen c5. Now that the bishop had this square, he went queen c7, and now I went rook b1. And you can see that I've traded the b2 pawn for the e7 pawn. That's a very good trade, because not only has this trade happened where the e7 pawn was one of the defending pawns on the king side, but additionally we can see that now all of white's pieces are developed and pretty active. In fact, we can of course add the queen, whereas black's pieces are all developed, but they're a little bit shakier, and importantly, this king could be under a lot of pressure along this diagonal if this bishop on b2 is lost. Hence why black did not capture here, but instead took on b2. But because I would take on b2, and then the position would be very good for white. My grandmaster opponent actually played the move bishop to f6. And I just couldn't resist including this as a final little exercise for those of you who are curious. You can write in the comments of this section. This is not exactly the topic of this series on active versus passive play, but I just wanted to show you that by playing actively, I was able to get a very strong player, grandmaster, to play the move bishop to f6. He's trying to defend things, and I actually missed a beautiful win in this position. So if you guys want to try and solve it, white to play and win, and leave your comments, you leave your answer in the comments below. So that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one, where we'll be talking about a situations that call for a little bit more passive play. Hope you've enjoyed it. As always, give it a like, and if you like this type of content, please subscribe. So see you again.